Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Grayzone. We've got a special show today. We have Glenn Diesen on the historic Putin-Trump summit in Alaska, and then we'll be talking to Gaza Humanitarian Foundation whistleblower Anthony Aguilar, who was at UG Solutions and saw the reality on the ground, the horror on the ground firsthand, and is now speaking out. The Trump-Putin summit in Alaska is being followed today by a meeting with Vladimir Zelenskyy at the White House, along with the coalition of the willing, the European satrap states who will escort him to the White House and presumably seek to sabotage whatever was discussed and what could be negotiated between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. So to discuss the summit in Alaska and what's taking place today in Washington as well as in Europe, we're joined now by Professor of Political Science Glenn Diesen, who is a leading analyst of European and Eastern European affairs and one of my favorite podcast hosts. Glenn, welcome to the Grayzone.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
So maybe we could start with the freak out that has been ensuing in Washington, which, you and I have had a front row seat to for the past, 3 years or maybe more. And we've just been hearing rhetoric like this constantly, but this is from one of the top Democrats in the Senate, Chris Van Hollen.
I'd like to move to the summit, if you will. You're on the Foreign Relations Committee. You watched that summit, I'm sure. What is your reaction to what happened?
Well, Martha, there's no sugarcoating this. Donald Trump once again got played by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin got the red carpet treatment on American soil. But we got no ceasefire, no imminent meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy. All the threatened sanctions that Donald Trump talked about apparently have been set aside. Donald Trump got flattered by Vladimir Putin, but when it comes to Ukraine and our European allies, this was a setback. I do believe that Congress now, the Senate in particular, should move forward on bipartisan legislation that has over 60 senators as co-sponsors that would impose sanctions on Russia and Vladimir Putin.
And we'll see whether that happens. But just very quickly, aren't personal relations important?
Relations are important, and I have no objection to people talking, but you want to have a clear objective in mind. Clearly, Vladimir Putin had a clear objective in mind, and he came to Alaska and gave up nothing. Whereas, Donald Trump said he had hoped to do, ceasefire. He'd hoped to fly in Zelenskyy, maybe even while Vladimir Putin was there. None of that happened, and meanwhile, they've taken the pressure off the sanctions. I mean, again, Donald Trump was supposed to impose sanctions on Russia weeks ago now, and nothing. So this was a victory for Vladimir Putin.
Glenn, was this a victory for the Russian president and the Russian leadership, as Chris Van Hollen and much of the Beltway class are claiming? And, what would a victory actually mean? And then what do we think these figures actually want? I mean, Van Hollen's talking about sanctioning Russia. Russia's the most sanctioned country in the world. So were there winners or losers in this summit?
No, I think the winner would be, world peace. That is, look at it like this. The Russians, they invaded because they tried for years to stop NATO's incursion into Ukraine, and they see this as an existential threat. And I always make the point: it doesn't matter if the EU leaders or people in Washington don't agree. This is the way they see the security threats, and this is what they're acting on. So for the Russians, they demanded, as the foundation of any peace will have to be Ukraine's neutrality, which is no more NATO expansion to Ukraine. And they're not going to move away from this. And if this had been February of 2022, that would have been enough. But as we know, at the peace agreement or the negotiations back in Istanbul 3.5 years ago, the British and Americans sabotaged it. And for this reason, we had 3.5 years of war. And now there's been territorial changes throughout this war. So the Russians are saying, essentially, they want Istanbul plus. That is the neutrality for Ukraine plus the territorial concessions. Now, the territorial concessions also due to lack of trust. That is, even if the NATO would now say, well, Ukraine should be neutral, well, they can change their minds tomorrow. So it's important for the Russians that they now, at least this strategic territory isn't going to be used against them in the future. Now, you can say this isn't just, this isn't according to international law, but again, this is what happens when a great power says that it's a threat to its national security. So the idea that Trump can now just pressure Russia to do anything, it's ludicrous. As you suggested, there is no more sanctions. They've thrown every sanctions there is. And they said, well, we're going to put powerful secondary sanctions. But the Chinese, the Indians, they made it clear, we're not going to go along with this. We're going to continue trade with Russia. And if America doesn't want to trade with us, okay, well, that's America's choice. And, alienating the Indians, by the way, that was a horrible achievement. And also the weapons. There are no more secret weapon depots. Biden emptied everything. There's no more weapons to send. And even if there were weapons, the Ukrainians have a massive short power manpower shortage, which means that the front lines are collapsing anyways. Their casualties are beginning to spike more and more, as you see towards the end of wars. So it's not that if this is a great deal, it's a terrible deal for the Ukrainians, and for the Americans and Europeans who hope to defeat Russia, it's especially bad. But every day the deal gets worse. Every day Ukrainian military lose more and more people, more and more territory, and more infrastructure, and the ability to ever recover declines. So this is why I think Trump now shifted from he called for unconditional ceasefire. Now, ceasefire just means we're going to freeze the front lines and then remove all the reasons to make any concessions towards for the Russians. Why would we ever accept to halt NATO expansion and accept that Ukraine restores its neutrality unless Russia was actually fighting and winning? The only reason why we have the meeting in Alaska is because Russia's winning. The only reason we're willing to consider NATO pulling out of Ukraine and not making it a frontline against Russia is because Russia's winning. So from the Russian perspective, a ceasefire is not peace. And this is why after Alaska, this was the main achievement. This was Putin convinced Trump that ceasefire doesn't do it. Then we just have to keep on fighting and take the territories instead. And this is how Trump shifted, but this also means that the war, America's not going to continue the war possibly, and this is why the Europeans are in panic now.
Yeah, and what Putin, the terms Putin laid out from the beginning of his special military operation or invasion were demilitarization and denazification. Although the U.S. media is unable to discuss kind of the material reality on the ground. And so they're addressing this in a psychological sense, that Putin is simply seeking to recover the lost glory of the Soviet Union and pointing to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov wearing a Soviet sweatshirt to the summit. How realistic now are the terms Putin laid out, demilitarization and denazification, which presumably means like disbanding the Azov regiment, which is now the 3rd Armored Regiment, now U.S. funded, and how realistic are those terms, and to what extent can Ukraine actually be demilitarized at this point?
Well, I think, that's the difficult part. But just in terms of this idea that they just want to restore the Soviet Union, all of this, it has to be noted, no one in Moscow was calling for laying any claims on Crimea before 2014. Again, and also if you look until 2014, only about 20% of Ukrainians wanted to join NATO. when they were asked, the polls show most preferred partnership with Russia. So there was no conflict then. What triggered the security competition was the NATO's incursion into Ukraine. When the government was toppled there in 2014 with the support of the West, the first thing they did was to put restrictions on the Russian language. On day one, the United States, the CIA and the British MI6 set a partnership to remake all of Ukraine's intelligence agencies, so it wouldn't be friendly to Russia, but used as an instrument. This is what triggered it. And the Russians responded by taking Crimea. Again, this was a response to the new security competition.
Yeah.
And they went into Donbass to say, well, we want the religious rights, language rights, cultural rights for Donbass. And if this is done, that's all we're after. So even Donbass were pushing for secession like Crimea, and Moscow went against it, saying, no, we'll come with this Minsk agreement where you get some autonomous right, can preserve this cultural rights, but then you will integrate back into Ukraine. This was the deal, and it wasn't pursued. So this idea that it was just Russian imperialism, it takes away all the contributions of the West, adding into this conflict. So I don't. It's just that there's no evidence for it, and I think this is the main problem. So if I had seen any evidence that any of the Russian politicians laid claim to Crimea before 2014, then this would sound more serious. But it's all very superficial, as the clip you just played. Trump is weak. He let Putin walk all over him. He manipulated him. What did the Russians give? I mean, the Russians actually gave seemingly a lot, willing to compromise. That is the neutrality issue, obviously, no NATO. This is written in stone. So this is something they could negotiate, and Trump accepted this. But in terms of the territorial issues, they're willing to freeze, it seems, the front lines in Kherson and Sabotage, which they don't control all the region, which they've annexed. So This is something, and they could pull out of Sumy in Dnipro and Kherson, but they won't give up Donbass. This is kind of the red line. So the idea that they didn't give up anything isn't right. And also, there might be some form of a security guarantee, some kind of maybe a weapons agreement, something in case... just for the Ukrainians to feel safer in the future without triggering a security competition with Russia. So there are talks, but these people, the only motivation, much like the Europeans who are now sitting in Washington, is they want a long war. They don't want to accept any concessions. They don't want a peaceful settlement. They just want to keep this going and hope for some miracle in the future.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, since you brought up the situation on the ground several times, the Russian military seems to be advancing around Pokrovsk, which would be a major breakthrough. I mean, they're just cruising through the territory in faster rates than at any time since 2022, early 2022. The Ukrainian military is sending members of Azov to kind of patch up the breakages in the front lines. But beyond Pokrovsk is Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, which are sort of the heart of the Donbass fortifications. And this is like the heart of the Ukrainian military doctrine, these fortified cities. And then once you break through that, you have rivers and areas that are more difficult for the Ukrainian military to fortify, and that would pretty much be the end of their defenses. So it seems like a non-starter. I mean, I guess I have two questions. First, how much has Russia's military progress forced this summit and forced the hand of the opponents of making a deal, including within the Trump administration, like Lindsey Graham? And second, how could the Ukrainians accept a deal where they give up this fortified territory in the Donbass, even if they give up, Zaporozhye and Kherson? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the progress, the Russians have been making huge progress. You wouldn't always know it from watching the media, because again, there's a lot of narrative control, and the purpose of the narrative control is to create a long war. And the way you do it is tell a story. Oh, look how little the front lines are actually moving. They're hardly moving forward at all. If you look at the entirety of Ukraine, it's very little. But this is not how you measure progress in a war of attrition. In a war of attrition, where you seek to exhaust or destroy the adversary, you don't send all your best troops and equipments to well-fortified defensive lines,
Right.
but just to take some territory. Well, because after you destroy the enemy's forces, then you can take the territory. So if you do go for territories, usually you go for weak spots, important cities where you can build up a critical amount of forces to move on, because you do need the logistics in place. You go for the enemy's logistics centers and different transportation routes. This is the main purpose. But anyways, you measure in terms of attrition, the attrition rate. That is, how many soldiers are you losing compared to the opponents? And at the moment, the Ukrainians are bleeding a lot. They're losing a lot of their men. So the territory comes at the end. When the enemy has been exhausted, defensive lines can't be protected anymore. Then you go for the territorial conquest. And that's the point that we have reached now. And this is why there's a desperation in the air, because the Ukrainians can't defend the front lines anymore. So the Russians are just punching holes in many different places. So they're encircling Kupiansk, they're encircling Pokrovsk, they're now encircling Konstantinivka. And of course, as you mentioned, if they take them, they can encircle Kramatorsk and Slavyansk as well. And with this, all of Donbass will fall anyways. So it's not as if the alternative isn't between this horrible deal and something good. It's between this horrible deal and something even worse. The former advisor of Zelenskyy, he made the point: either we give up 4 territories or we give up 8 territories. So let's go for the 4. There's no other good deal here. So it's all it's very artificial, what they're arguing for.
Well, in a kind of related note, I'm being told by many people in the chat that this stream on YouTube, at least, will not play in the EU. I'm having people from Germany, the UK, and Norway tell me that. Some are saying that if they restart the stream, they're able to view it. Well, we're on Rumble, and we're also on Twitter X, so you can watch it there. But that is this is the first time we've had that happen to us ever. But since some people are still able to watch this, the last time that Trump hosted Zelenskyy at the White House, the president just laid into the Ukrainian leader. And this was sort of what everyone was waiting for after Trump was elected, that he would make this move and start addressing the entitlement of Zelenskyy and dressing him down. Almost like literally commenting on his refusal to wear a suit to a meeting with the US president, his disrespectful attitude, his expectation that billions and billions of dollars of aid will start flowing in. And Trump briefly halted intelligence cooperation, as well as some weapons. And, I thought maybe this was the beginning of the end of this war, and that the killing would stop. But then a week later, the spigot was back on. The financial feeding tube to Kiev was back on. And, Trump was backing Ukraine ever since. Before the summit, he was golfing with Lindsey Graham. I'm still not clear on where this is going. And actually, Hillary Clinton just praised Donald Trump in a way we haven't heard before. I don't know if you saw this, Glenn, but this is pretty striking.
I think all of that is a very good signal that there is beginning to be a better understanding, both by the president and the people around him, as well as by the leaders of our European allies, that there can be common ground amongst us. And the kind of dismissiveness that we saw in the first Trump administration has been replaced by a much more obvious working relationship to the good of European security, transatlantic security, and hopefully Ukrainian security. So I'm actually encouraged. I think.
So why is Hillary Clinton encouraged, despite the freak out from the usual suspects in the Beltway and this historic handshake and red carpet summit in Alaska? And how do we know Trump won't turn back into Orange McCain the figure that we saw about a month ago. He's such an erratic, unstable figure with so many competing factions surrounding him.
Well, I'm not sure about Hillary Clinton. I mean, it does remind me a bit when Trump, the only time he was given any credit during his first administration is when he was doing a missile launch on Syria. So maybe they want to give him a attaboy for hosting the Europeans and Zelenskyy. I'm not really sure. I think, well, at least this is what we do here in Europe. The whole strategy is just play to Trump's ego. I mean, they all hate him in Europe, but when he comes here, they call him out, daddy, please hold the family together. I mean, we give up economic interest, security, and our dignity all at once. But I just want to have something to say on the first meeting they had in the Oval Office. I mean, the media again presented it all in terms of the optics. Oh, look at the bully, the poor man just defending his country, this little Churchillian man. Why is he doing this? But again, it's worth noting that Trump wanted a peace agreement. So he thought he would get Zelenskyy there, who would put pressure on him to accept some of the basic demands of the Russians. And the suit thing was actually, what I heard at least, was this was an indication that, because he put on this, green fatigues, this costume after the Russians invaded. And so they had hoped he would put on a suit and then be more moderate in his language. Instead, he just came into the Oval Office in his, fatigues, and he began, just telling, how evil Russia is. But once you go down that road, sell the conflict as one good side and then one evil side, you can't make peace anymore. Why would good make a compromise with evil? That's appeasement. That falls into our 1930s analogies, which we just apparently can't get enough of. So I think this is why there was such a huge spat. But and I think this is why the Europeans came along this time as well. But I'm not sure about Trump. It's very hard to figure him out. I'm kind of operating with two competing hypotheses here. One is that he's just weak and just says whatever the last person told him, and he flings a bit back and forth. The other is that he's trying to maneuver a very difficult space, because on one hand, he's got the Russians putting really harsh demands, and these are very big demands. No NATO, territorial concessions. I mean, they're winning the war, so they can demand a lot. But on the other side, he has the US political establishment. He has the Europeans. He has Zelenskyy, all of them opposing everything he's doing and doesn't want to give an inch. I mean, the Europeans are asking for $1 trillion reparation. Russia pull out of everything. Ukraine join NATO. Essentially, in victory, Russia should capitulate. This is their solution. So it's very difficult to bridge these two sides. So maybe at the beginning of the Trump administration, I remember Hegseth came out and said, no NATO, no security guarantees, and accept territorial concessions. I think the backlash was too big, so he began to walk it back a bit, and then speaking the language of an unconditional ceasefire. But did he honestly pursue it, or was this just to, I guess, appease the hawks within the Western camp? I don't really know. Either he's playing a very clever game, or he's just winging it, essentially. So I'm not. I haven't landed yet on which one.
Yeah, it's questionable to me, but we'll circle back to that, because I have a theory of my own. But I wanted to ask you just about something you wrote, and to expound on it a little bit. You wrote this on Telegram. The politicians who boycotted diplomacy for 3.5 years while hundreds of thousands of young men died on the front lines are reprehensible. The political media establishment that pressures academics to adopt the same stance, academics like yourself, I would assume, refusing dialogue with the opposing side, is authoritarian. Chanting freedom and democracy while behaving in such a manner reveals them as ideological fundamentalists. These people are not capable of formulating a serious argument. They only squeal Putinist and propaganda to censor and cancel all opposing voices. And yeah, clearly you're also referring to how you've been targeted as an academic in the heart of the EU, being attacked as a Putinist for calling for actual diplomacy. I mean, this is Russiagate in the US was a war on diplomacy. It was to criminalize diplomacy. But I want to ask you about the motivations of those who have attacked you, those who are attacking this summit, those who within the EU who are pushing war. Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, Mark Rutte, all of these figures. Is it purely ideological for them? Are they really just zealots, or is there not a material basis to their opposition?
Well, I can't tell really exactly what their motivations is, but what they're saying is, this was unprovoked. This was an unprovoked invasion. Russia wanted to restore the Soviet Union. Putin is Hitler. This kind of rhetoric. It's like Walter Lippmann. When he wrote about propaganda, as well as Edward Bernays, they argued that the core of it was creating the stereotypes. If you have one side which is good, the other one is evil. As long as people accept the stereotype, then the facts don't really matter that much anymore. And so I can't really tell if they actually believe this. But once you buy into this premise that it was unprovoked, then I understand their policies. If they're just Putin's gonna move on and take Poland next, of course, this is then we should send all the weapons we have. We shouldn't make any compromise, because any compromise will just embolden him. But the point is, the premise is all wrong. There's no evidence for this, as I argued earlier with Crimea. No one in Russia was laying claim to Crimea before the coup. So it's hard to see if they believe it. I mean, if they did believe it, why haven't they actually rebuilt their armies in a proper way? I think it's just rhetoric. Like NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said, either we send weapons or we have to learn how to speak Russian. I mean, this is, we have this one thing with threat inflation, but this is just comedy. So it's, but I think it's something unique about the Europeans as well, because in the EU consists of a lot of member states. I think it's 27 now after the British left. But how do you have consensus for the competing national interests of 27 countries? Well, you don't. So there's a focus on unity through statement of values. So this creates often what you refer to as the rhetorical entrapment. That is, everyone accepts that one policy is good. For example, NATO expansion, it's to spread democracy. Okay, now everyone gets on board, because if you don't support it, then you're against democracy. And what do we need unity now to fight the Russians? So, well, okay, this is about an aggressor fighting against just an aspiring democracy and the beacon of hope. So if everyone rhetorically accepts this, then it's very difficult to walk away from it. And this is the problem we have across in Europe. There's no debate about this in terms of the policy, the war policies. It's just either you send more weapons and you denounce any diplomacy with Russia, otherwise you're a Putinist. This is it. There's only ad hominem. There's no. They only go after the person. Or no one can defend their arguments, and it's very frustrating.
Well, I can definitely relate to that. Experience the same thing here, and constantly showing up in all of these phony disinformation reports, although they never explain what disinformation I've propagated. I've also had the experience of being doxxed by very seemingly sophisticated Ukrainian Telegram sites. Had a Ukrainian USAID-backed group, Molfar, blast out my personal information and even dox family members in a mass emailing campaign. Then there's the kill list, Mirotvorets. For some reason, I'm not on it, but my wife, Anya Parampil, and my colleague, Aaron Mate, are on it, which makes me even more worried. I don't know are you on Mirotvorets?
No.
But talk about how you've been attacked for being kind of a lone voice of what I would consider sanity, but I think objectively calling for peace between the EU and Russia. And, where you are you're in Norway now, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, my experience having been there just several years ago was that like Finland, Norway, Sweden, they're deluged with NATO propaganda, previously having been neutral states. So what has your experience been like, just personally? What kind of price have you paid for being a voice of for diplomacy?
Well, this is a strange thing, because what I argue is we shouldn't send weapons to Ukraine because it's at a country at war. This used to be our policy. Even our prime minister said the same thing right after the Russians invaded in 2022. It's not even being discussed to send weapons. This is not something we do, and we always said that whenever there's a war, the most important thing is to talk. So this is what my argument was. We shouldn't boycott diplomacy, and we shouldn't send weapons. And but they portray this as being a pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian stance. But I've been saying for the past few years, I warned it back in 2013, 14, don't topple the government. The Russians will take Crimea. I said you have to implement the Minsk agreement, give the Russian security guarantees. Talk to the opponents. Otherwise, the Russians see this as an existential threat. They will destroy Ukraine. They will take all the territories back, which used to belong to Russia before 1922. They will then, once they take all back their own territory, they will destroy the rest. So it can't be used against Russia in the future. But there's no acceptance of this. They say, well, if you say this, then you support Russia. But, I also make the argument. I think it would be a good idea for Iran to get nuclear weapons as a deterrence, because countries will come after them, the US and Israel. I hope they don't get it. And I hope that Russia doesn't destroy Ukraine. But you have to recognize the security concerns and actions of your opponents. But this is the problem we have in all of Europe now. We never discuss security concerns of opponent. If you discuss what worries the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, you're a traitor, essentially. Yeah. So how can you assess the security policies of your opponents if you can't discuss their concerns? Well, everything happens in a vacuum. It's just Putin, everyone's just really, really bad men. And if we can get rid of them, then peace would come back. So this is my point. This is why it's a difficult environment to debate anything. But yeah, we have the same problems here. We have institutions which are financed by the National Endowment for Democracy. The main one here is the Norwegian Helsinki Committee. They write letters to my university. They write articles all the time. They put a picture of my house on the internet. If I go to have been invited to give speeches, they try to have it cancelled. I mean, it's a very ugly environment here. And only a few days ago, there was this strange campaign in the media in which they said that they had evidence that I was part of a Russian influence operation. And the reason why, well, they found they got an invitation list to a conference I attended in Kaliningrad in April of last year, and they said that, oh, look, he's on the list of foreign people who've been invited, and they presented this as if it would be a list over agents of Russia, but it was a conference devoted to Immanuel Kant. It was his 300th birthday. I even published my speech on the internet. Well, I already had it on my Substack, and I just reposted it. Like my whole speech, everything I talked about was about the limits of reason, excesses of individualism. I put some doubt on the durability of secular morality. I mean, it was all around Immanuel Kant. This was the whole. And they made it into some cheap James Bond thriller. I mean, it was so stupid. And now, of course, all the media can just refer to me as, well, now he has been exposed for being part of an influence operation. I mean, it's just fake news. It's just overall the same media outlets who for years, pushed the Russiagate on their front line, on their headlines. And when all of this has been exposed as being a big hoax, a fraud, they don't do anything to correct it. They don't mention that they got it wrong for all these years. They don't discuss the consequence of getting this wrong. And now these are the people who are judging, and the journalists sending letters and writing articles encouraging the university to have me fired. I mean, it's just becoming very authoritarian and ugly. And they don't ever have any arguments. They just I even have, based on this, I had some colleagues who wrote an article in the paper going, it was 36 of them saying, oh, we denounce Glenn's position. We stand with Ukraine. It's like, I thought I stood with Ukraine. Everything I argued is don't do this. Ukraine will be destroyed. Even in November of 2021, I wrote an article saying we have to give the Russian security guarantees now. Otherwise, again, this was 3 months before the Russian invasion. Otherwise, war will be unavoidable. That was in my title, unavoidable. And after Russia invaded, they said, oh, look, Professor Diesen was trying to legitimize an invasion. So every time, even when you warn, you're legitimizing it because you're explaining why the Russians would do this. So it's I don't know. It's horrible here now. I lived abroad for 20 years. I moved back here 5 years ago. It's been the biggest mistake of my life. I think it's
Really,
it's getting really, really, awful. It's so no. We're already looking at plans at moving because it's going so far beyond anything acceptable. Even the previous foreign minister here said that she said in a debate with me that I hoped Russia would crush Ukraine so all of Europe would be insecure and threatened. This is what I want now. So I'm a traitor apparently as well. So it's just this is how the debate here. There's no one can discuss, no one can meet your arguments, no one can argue anything. It's just it's become terrible.
and I'm showing comments from our viewers that the stream is just down in several EU countries. It's pretty much being blocked in the EU. You're not allowed to. I think you could be personally targeted across the EU. I remember, we having some interviews with Scott Ritter, whose entire channel was taken down by YouTube, and just for merely interviewing him, YouTube would take down the entire video. So this is the authoritarianism you're talking about, the complete lack of an argument from the other side, the refusal to compete in the so-called marketplace of ideas after the disaster that they fomented in Ukraine. And, the ironic thing, Glenn, is that it looks like most Ukrainians, average Ukrainians, not the think tankers who, the soft-handed Ukrainian think tankers who get interviewed on Fareed Zakaria or by The Economist, actually agree with you. This is a very recent Gallup poll showing a complete collapse in Ukrainian support for war and support for negotiated peace. 24% support the war, 69% support negotiated peace, a complete reversal since February 2022. Why is this being ignored?
Well, they're not interviewed they're the wrong Ukrainians though. They're not the one interviewed on TV. The only one they put on TV are the Ukrainians who want to keep on fighting. And indeed, I can understand that if you're Ukrainian, you had your country invaded, you're losing territory. I can understand that some people want to keep on fighting. But according to that Gallup poll, that's 24%. Why is it that every European news network will only show the Ukrainians who are saying fight, 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 more weapons, when 69% of Ukrainians want an end to this war, who wants to negotiate an end, going against the policies of these European leaders? And most of these European leaders are now sitting in Washington. Their approval ratings are just abysmal. This is the Macron, Starmer, Merz. These are some of the worst leaders, most unpopular we've ever had here. And but again, it goes. I would like to know what the counter argument is. Previously, you mentioned that the tweet I wrote, because for 3.5 years they've been boycotting any diplomacy with Russians. Forget about negotiations, just sitting down and talking to them, looking if there's a possible avenue for peace, or at least even minor things like avoid the excesses, the most brutality of the war. After the Russians and Ukrainians finally sat down and began to talk, immediately they agreed on exchanges of prisoners of war. 2,000 men got to go home to their families. No one in Europe, none of our leaders appeared to think that this was a worthy cause. And worst of all, not only did they boycott this diplomacy, which I've been doing now for 3.5 years, but they pride themselves of it. They say, oh, look how good we are. We are not talking to our opponents because, as Kaja Kallas would say, the EU foreign policy chief, I don't talk to war criminals. Putin is a war criminal. Why would we talk to him? Well, you talk to your adversary to end wars. So this is and now, of course, they want to push this on the rest of the people. So if you're an academic, you want to speak with the Russians, understand their position, and see what kind of avenues you have for peace, well, then you're essentially a traitor. Why aren't you also boycotting them? It doesn't make any sense. But this is my point. They never have any counter arguments. If it was unprovoked, how do we explain, as I said before, that on the first day after the regime change in Ukraine, which majority didn't want to be a part of NATO, on the first day the CIA and MI6 set up a partnership with the Ukrainian intelligence agencies for the purpose of using Ukraine as a weapon against Russia. Right. How is this not unprovoked? Well, now you're justifying the invasion. No, I'm not justifying. I'm just saying this was provoked. This is why they responded. So, and this is good news. If the Russians, aren't just crazies trying to conquer all of Europe for no good reason, then we can look for a compromise. This is the good thing of recognizing the security concern of your opponent. Then you have an avenue for alleviating it and finding some peace. And these people who don't want to even discuss with the Russians now, the Ukrainians want an end to a war they're losing. And things, as you see at the end of wars, the casualties really spike. And but they're the one who monopolizing on the pro-Ukrainian label. And anyone who say we have to recognize reality, the country going to get destroyed. It's just, I don't understand it. It would be as if calling yourself pro-Mexican because you're encouraging Mexico to go fight America. It's, you're enabling their suicide, and you're doing it against the will of the people. And it's always pro to help Ukraine. They always say help Ukraine, but rarely do they have any support from the Ukrainians. If it's toppling the government, you had Ukraine during the offensive in 2023. You had the Ukrainian generals complaining that they were pressured by Washington to do offensives, which they knew wouldn't work. I mean, over and over again, it's we pretend as if we're acting in the best interest of Ukraine. So it's I don't see the evidence for it. And if there was anyone who had a counter argument, I assume they would come with it instead of just trying to cancel.
Yeah, I thought the most devastating moment of the Oval Office meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump's team was when J.D. Vance brought up the press gangs that are throwing young Ukrainian men into vans and taking them to the front, of the resistance that they get from those Ukrainians. Zelenskyy didn't have a response. He'd never been confronted with this by a U.S. interviewer. These videos had been covered up in U.S. media, and his response was, "Well, have you been to Ukraine?" Because he would accept Bono and all of these celebrities, Ben Stiller in his office in Ukraine, and they get to say they go there, but they don't actually see the reality of working class Ukrainians. Before 2022, Ukraine had one of the largest refugee or outflows of its population because of the civil war that, as you mentioned, was inspired by the CIA, that was turning Ukraine into basically a CIA base on Russia's border. So this is never acknowledged, and I guess it's why the other side doesn't want to argue in public with you. These European leaders who seem to seek perpetual war are NATO, so I guess that means Mark Rutte himself, the European Commission, von der Leyen, France, Germany, and Finland confirmed they will join Zelenskyy when he meets Trump in DC today. He has to be chaperoned to the meeting this time, and they're presenting this kind of unified front. How do you think the Europeans will try to sabotage any potential deal? What kind of leverage do they have? What machinations will they deploy? And is Finland the most extreme country in the room this time?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to Finland, to be honest. No, but it is a strange development. Finland always had a majority opposed to joining NATO. And again, since World War II, they were considered to be the greatest success story of neutrality. They agreed not to join an anti-Russian alliance, and as a result, they didn't have any more tensions with the Russians. And but then, of course, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, the polling it spiked in favor of a NATO membership, and So they just rushed them in, now they are NATO's longest front line against Russia, and Russia's now rebuilding old military districts there, which had previously been dismantled, but now, of course, they're coming back on. And I watched some German TV where a German general was saying, "Oh, look, this is evidence that Putin has plans after Ukraine. He will take Finland." I mean, this is everything happens in a vacuum. We can never accept that. Well, maybe they're also reacting to what we're doing. I mean, this is the security competition of the security dilemma. But I do think that I'm not sure what the Europeans can play against Trump, though. I mean, they don't really hold that many cards anymore. And again, this is the Europeans who, you had the German chancellor standing next to Biden when Biden threatened to destroy Nord Stream. Now that the United States said that the Ukrainians destroyed it, the Germans don't even know what to do anymore. They just refuse to talk about Nord Stream because there's no good narrative anymore. So it's recently we had a trade agreement with, not with the European Union, had a trade agreement with the United States. They essentially, Europeans themselves recognize this as a horrible deal, but we can't live without daddy, apparently. So the Europeans don't really hold that many cards. I think they will try to appeal to Trump's ego, though, just saying, well, listen, we just have to pressure Russia a little bit more. The Russians are weak. If you give in, that makes you a bad leader. And Putin won over you. This is something to go appeal to his superficial nature. And I just I don't know why it keeps why they keep on trying to keep this alive, because you mentioned this last time. Vance argued that all these young men were being dragged off the street and sent to the front. In the past, this was considered to be Russian propaganda. They said, "Oh no, that's not happening. This is what the Russians say." But we said that we used to say that about the fascist groups. Every time we saw a swastika or salute to Bandera, the first impulse was to explain it away. Now, kind of everyone realizes that yes, these are fascist groups, the whole idea that Zelenskyy was an authoritarian, this was also Russian propaganda. But now, recently, this is also acceptable to say in the West. And of course, the biggest no-no all time was never suggest that NATO expansion could be a reason for this. But now I've seen articles in Politico where they say, well, perhaps if we can give NATO an EU membership instead, then we can take NATO membership off the table. So suddenly now it seems we might be allowed to speak about NATO expansion after all. So I think the narrative is collapsing. And once the narrative collapses, the Europeans don't really have much to stand on. I just think they're panicking. This is... Europe was the post-Cold War dream of Europe was to be one out of two poles, the EU and US, which would form the collective hegemony of the political West. Now, America is pivoting to Asia. They want to get out of Europe, get out of Ukraine. And what does Europe have left now? It's dwindling in relevance, economics, security. Everything is going from bad to worse. I think they hoping for defeating Russia, and then America would come back, and we could go back to the 1990s. I think that's as far as the strategy goes.
And we continue to have people report that this video is being squelched in the EU. Go to Rumble. We are on Rumble. We're live on Rumble. Go there. But this is very telling. I don't know. It looks like someone is trying to sabotage this stream, so you can't hear Glenn's excellent analysis. I want to kind of sandwich two questions together for you, because you mentioned the pivot to Asia. I mean, my theory is, to the extent that the Vance faction in the Trump administration has managed to secure this summit and is pushing for a deal, you also have figures like Elbridge Colby, who are part of that faction that want a deal here. They see China as the real enemy. They see a long-term war with China as the true objective the United States should be pursuing. So is the momentum for a deal within the Trump administration going to increase long-term momentum for economic and possibly even military warfare with China, and if that takes place, will we simultaneously see some kind of decoupling between the EU and US?
Well, the interests are at least shifting, and this is the challenge of Europe for a multipolar world order. That is, we kind of linked ourselves completely to the United States under the unipolar order, and in the multipolar order, the US have very different interests than Europe. It has different priorities. Europe has always been the main focus of the United States in its foreign policy, but now, of course, we might become a distant third after Asia and the Middle East. So there's a very desperate desire to keep, as Rutte would say, the family together, that daddy can't leave. No, I think this is the main problem for the Europeans. They can't find their way in this multipolar world. My argument has always been that we have to respond to these new realities, and that means you have to diversify your foreign partners. You can't put all your eggs in the American basket when the Americans don't even want to be in Europe anymore. It's a recipe for irrelevance. But it's very difficult to make that argument in Europe. They think it's anti-European or anti-Western. But if the Europeans should do what the Ukrainians should have done before the coup, they should diversify their ties, have some ties, keep good relations with the US, but also work with China, India, Russia, everyone else. This is to avoid this excessive dependence on any one state or region. I think this is what they should have done. From my perspective, the Biden versus Trump approach to this war is a bit different. That is, both of them recognize that it was a problem that China and Russia were getting closer and closer. What Biden's strategy appeared to be, let's knock out Russia using Ukraine, and we can shift our focus to Asia. This is what Keith Kellogg and Lindsey Graham. You just had an abundance of different American leaders said this very openly. And how brilliant it was. We can use the Ukrainians to knock out Russia, and we can focus on China. The problem solved. Well, it didn't work. And so I think the Trump strategies, we reach a little bit out to the Russians and as the weaker part in this duo, and at least prevent them from getting too close. And usually this is a good plan to some extent, at least avoid an anti-American alliance. However, I don't think Trump is that altruistic on this. I think he would like to maybe outsource the containment of Russia to the Europeans. So if the Europeans will still want to fight Russia a bit or contain it, then they can do so, but then they should use their own militaries and their own resources, and America can focus on China. At least this would be a good, or seemingly for some hawks, a good plan B. That is, you can engage with then Russia in Asia, but still confront them in Europe. I mean, this seems for some to be something they can lean on. But the Europeans, there's a strategic vacuum, in my opinion. There's no plan. It's just we can't give up. We can't let the Russians win. Then that will put an end to the world order, which is dying.
Yeah, I mean, just in closing, you've pointed to the expansion of NATO in the late 90s as the real roots of this conflict. If Ukraine is forced to sign a deal agreeing not to join NATO, which they never, I mean, it didn't seem like they were ever going to be allowed in it. It was just dangled in front of them to keep them fighting. But if they formalize that and the NATOification of Ukraine ends, the sort of de facto NATO role in Ukraine, how much of a blow is that to NATO as a whole? We keep hearing that, if Europe loses, or if the democracies lose, then this will alter the security architecture of Europe. How devastating will that be for this kind of transatlantic war alliance?
Oh, I think it's going to be devastating. I don't think NATO can possibly be the same anymore. But that also is because the United States doesn't have the same interests anymore. Europe is not the center of the world anymore. On the contrary, its relevance is just plummeting day by day. But but it could also revive the discussion of the role of NATO, and the extent to which it, instead of providing security, it triggers conflict. And keep in mind that in the 1990s, there actually was a debate about expanding NATO. Those who opposed it, leading people like George Kennan, you have Jack Matlock, the list was long. You had American leaders signing it, like 40, 50 people at a time signing letters why this was a horrible idea. But even the people who are for it, expanding NATO, like Madeleine Albright, recognized, well, of course, it is going to alienate Russia. They're going to see themselves being surrounded. But as the Secretary of Defense under Clinton said, well, everyone, when he warned everyone that Russia would feel betrayed and this would restart the Cold War, no one disagreed with it. It's just that Russia was weak, so who cares? This was the sentiment, according to him. So it was recognized that this was a problem in the 90s, but then the decision to expand was made. We consolidated around the narrative that, oh, this isn't a concern for Russia at all. This is just us promoting democracy. But now, of course, when the big problem was always Ukraine. Everyone knew that Robert Gates once said, or wrote in his memoirs, that this was one bridge too far. You have also another CIA director, which is William Burns, of course, wrote the same in 2008, that this was the good chance this would trigger a Russian invasion. So this was one step too far, and now we had the war, we lost the war. I think this would open up some criticism now of NATO, asking, well, what was the purpose of this? As Orban says, in Hungary, we joined NATO as a collective defense, not to go and try to destroy Russia. So I think NATO could have a huge problem after this. It could be existential, which is why, many countries in Europe are quite desperate now.
Yeah, I think that's the real material reason behind their obsession with extending this war for as long as possible. I remember, I don't know if it was Vogue magazine, they had a cover of Ukrainian youth looking like teen models storming through a military base happily in their new fatigues, as though they're kind of raising up the next generation to be slaughtered so they can continue this war, and glamorizing them. It's really sick, but also you can understand the sickness through the priorities of NATO, which really doesn't have any reason to exist. And NATO itself is pivoting to Asia in order to maintain some sort of raison d'etre under Rutte. So do you see that? I mean, I still see this war continuing for some time.
Yeah, what I suspect will happen, I might be proven wrong. I mean, as we speak, Trump is sitting down with Zelenskyy, and I think most likely Trump isn't going to be able to bridge these two very different positions. What the Russians demand, the Europeans and Zelenskyy won't accept. So they will want to keep the war going. The big question is what Trump will do. Will he walk away from this, or will he just continue what he's doing now, supply weapons? And in all honesty, he pretends as if this isn't his war, but these are American weapons. They rely on American targeting and intelligence and logistics. So, United States is fighting now a proxy war against Russia. Every day some Russians will get killed because of the United States involvement in this. So this can escalate. It can be growing tensions. But as you said, you can't do this another 3.5 years. The front lines are breaking now. Even if Trump decides to go full Biden on this and join in, there's not that much can be done anymore. Yeah. So it's, as I said, its option is this bad deal or even worse deal in the future. And my great concern is that Ukraine will be completely destroyed. This could escalate also to further tensions between the West and Russia. Things could go really bad. You can have another risk of a nuclear war like we saw towards the end of 2024. So I'm a bit optimistic. At least there's some diplomacy again, talking to the Russians. At least that's one step. Diplomacy is always a good thing. And even now, there's some European countries, like France, discussing, well, if the Americans are talking to the Russians, we're not isolating Russia, we're isolating ourselves. And I mean, this is getting embarrassing for Europe. We used to be the meeting point, like Geneva, Helsinki. This is where American and Russian presidents would meet. Now they don't even want the Europeans in the room anymore, neither the Americans or the Russians. So it's it's just this doubling down over and over. It's so self-destructive.
Yeah.
But they convince themselves that it's morally righteous, and it's anyone who goes against them are essentially standing with the enemy. This is so there's no course correction.
There isn't a course correction, and it will really take a generation to rethink this, a new generation to rethink this. And I think you're on the front lines as a academic and scholar and influencer, Glenn Diesen, and you're getting a lot of support in the chat, even as our stream is being heavily suppressed in the EU. So thanks so much for joining us at the Grayzone. And I direct everyone to watch Glenn Diesen's own interviews. They're excellent. Follow him on Telegram and Twitter. Is there anywhere else people should follow you?
Yeah, Twitter, YouTube, and Substack, I guess. So, but just want to say I'm a huge fan of the Grayzone. So it's a great privilege to be on. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Glenn. And we'll see you again. Keep up the good work. All right, so we have another excellent guest up next, Anthony Aguilar. He was backstage, and now I don't see him now, or he's coming back. So, Anthony, just give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready to join. Are you ready? Okay. I can't hear you back when you're backstage, so just give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. Okay, here we go. So Anthony Aguilar is the whistleblower, the one whistleblower to emerge from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which we've been discussing and exposing week after week here at the Grayzone. And so we're now going to hear from the man himself about one of the most dystopian humanitarian military endeavors in recent history. And I think as far as whistleblowers go, Anthony Aguilar is one of the most articulate and powerful speakers that I've heard. So we're really privileged to be joined here by you, Anthony. Thanks so much for joining us at the Grayzone.
It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be a part of this and to share time with you. And you know, I'm committed to the world knowing the truth, and I think that this is something that I'm willing to risk everything for, because I think that it's that important. I think this is a moment in humanity, and the truth must be known.
Well, we're happy to help you get the word out here. This is a very painful truth, and there are so many layers of horror to it. But let me first ask you, you first made international headlines back in July when you became the first person to speak out publicly about what's been happening at these GHF aid distribution sites, as they're referred to. Tell us what motivated your decision to speak out.
So the question you ask, it's a great question, and I think that what I'd like to say is that I'm not the first to speak out. I'm not even the first to speak out on the record. Really? Palestinians have been speaking out for years.
Right.
Doctors, surgeons, UN workers, aid workers that are in Gaza, that have witnessed these things, have been speaking out on the record with their face on TV for years. And before I spoke on the record, other contractors from UG Solutions and Safe Reach Solutions under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation had spoke. When I felt that I needed to come forward, it was a deliberate decision to be on the record. I didn't accidentally fall into it where someone released my name and I said, okay, well, now I've got to. It was deliberate because I felt that if this matters to me, which it does, then there's no other way than to own this and to put myself behind it in terms of here I am. Here's the truth.
Yeah.
Here's what I witnessed and what I saw. And I'm not hiding behind anonymity or just a name behind a headline. I am, and I had to give credence to the and to be honest, my spouse, my wife, who is a career military officer, also retired from the military, served a distinguished career, 82nd Airborne, combat veteran. She's a great source of advice in my life, I would say. And she said to me, she said, I shared the story with her about Amir, and we both wept for that. And when I got home from Gaza and I was able to talk to her in person, she said to me, she's like, you have to go forward and you have to be on the record. You have to share this truth, and you have to do it on the record because of the credibility of what you've seen in your life. You're not someone that is making an assumption or someone that doesn't know what they're talking about. You have seen things. You have experienced things that give this story credit, that you're just not another voice in the crowd. And so that's why I felt like I had to come on the record. I gained nothing from this. I'd like to tell people, I'd like to make it so clear to everyone that I have no social media. I don't have a podcast. I'm not looking for clicks or likes. I don't have TikTok or Twitter or MySpace, if that's still around. Like I have no social media whatsoever. I gain nothing from this. I am not sponsored or paid by anybody. I am not being backed by anyone. I don't have a media relations team. I don't have a PR firm. I don't have a lawyer. It's just me and the truth. I'm sitting at home in my office using my phone that I barely know how to use. Like I gain nothing from this. In fact, I've lost a lot. Even, this morning, today, at around 9 a.m., I got a phone call from the Special Forces Association parachute team, of which I was a part of. We did demonstration jumps for Special Forces. And I was told that I was no longer a member of the team because of my speaking out against Israel. Wow.
Against a foreign military.
Yeah. So from the Special Forces Association parachute team, of which I've been a member as a Green Beret, I was, as of this morning, called. Sorry, you can't be on the team anymore. You with your position on speaking out against Israel, we can't have you representing the Special Forces Association. Really? Wow. That should be telling to so many people that hear this, that I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, not to a foreign government or a foreign military. And if anyone thinks that they're going to intimidate me into not telling the truth over being part of a club, get out of here, because the truth is more important.
So you signed up for UG Solutions. You were recruited by UG Solutions. Give us a glimpse of how they recruited you, how much they pay their security personnel, and what was the daily routine like when you were in Gaza?
So I recently retired, hung up my uniform after a 25-year career. This right at the beginning of the new year, took my terminal leave. My last day in the Army was March. I hadn't even been out of the Army 2 months. Contracting, independent contracting, paramilitary contracting was nowhere in Tony's bingo card. I was not in my plan. UG Solutions called me May 13th. I got a phone call. Typically, I don't answer numbers I don't know, but it was a 919 number, North Carolina. UG Solutions is headquartered here in North Carolina. So I took the call, and they were seeking recently retired or recently out of the service special operations background soldiers for this mission. They called me. And so that's how I became aware of it. And initially going in, my interpretation, or what I believed as it was explained to me going in, that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would be an independent, unilateral, separate entity from the government, from the IDF. It would be much like the International Red Cross or the UN or UNRWA or the World Food Kitchen or the World Food Program, an independent entity to deliver the humanitarian aid. And I wanted to be a part of that. Truly, I wanted to be a part of doing good, and regardless of the reasoning for the Israeli government blocking the United Nations and others from going, I felt that I could be a part of doing good, of providing humanitarian aid to human beings in need.
Yeah.
It became apparent to me within the first 24 to 48 hours when we got into Israel and then into Gaza that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not an independent unilateral entity. They are not. They are an appendage of the Israeli government. They are paid for, hired by, and the Israeli government is the GHF's client. And they take all orders and they take all directives from the Israeli government. There is no independent or unilateral entity of the GHF. That is a lie.
Jake Wood, who was supposed to be the executive director of GHF, he resigned just 2 days before the mission began and said that it violated his understanding of humanitarianism. I think he saw the writing on the wall. We were all calling it out in independent media. It was obvious what this was about. It was about replacing the UN system with something controlled by Israel. And I wanted to ask how much you understood about Gaza, about the situation that average people faced in Gaza, about the occupation, and about what GHF's real business was when you signed up for the mission.
So, I've seen, well, again, to answer the latter part of that, the question is that, when I first signed on to the mission, when I first said, yes, I want to go do this, it wasn't for the money. It wasn't for the glory. I'd seen enough of war. I'm a retiree with 100% VA. Like, wasn't for the money. I wanted to go to help, and I wanted to go to help under the auspice that the United States, under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was stepping up to do something right. So that's why I thought what I thought going in. That is not the case. So on the 26th of May, again, as you said, before the entire operation kicks off, this big project, the cutting of the ribbon, the start of the race. Jake Wood, the director of GHF, steps down. The day that happened, I remember when that happened, because I was at Karim Shalom, the operations center in Karim Shalom, which is in the southern portion of Israel by the entrance into the enclave near the Egyptian border. That's where the operations center was, and I'm there. And this announcement was made. Like, I remember the Safe Breach Solutions, the higher contract guy in the operations center. He's like, "Hey, Jake Wood stepped down." I'm like, "Who's Jake Wood?" I really did not know much about it. And then they, on the screen in the operations center, they put up this article, and I read it, and I was like, and the vision that went, the image that went through my head was from, in that movie Indiana Jones, when they're in the airplane and the pilot jumps out and the plane's flying without a pilot, and they're like, "What do we do?" Like, that's how I felt. Like, here's this whole operation, this whole project, and the pilot just jumped out of the plane. Like, what are we doing? And then when I read the article that the reason he stepped down, it then became more clear to me that the things that I had seen up to that point, what I had witnessed, and some of my assumptions that I felt like, am I wrong? Like, became clear to me that yeah, there's a real problem here. And And there's a lot to be concerned about. So yeah, the guy in charge of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation on the very first day of us operating as an entity stepped down because he has concerns that the operation could not and would not be conducted in line with humanitarian principles. And boy,
Right.
I've never met Jake Wood, but sir, you were right.
Yeah. He also obviously was preempting some serious reputational destruction. I guess he cared about his reputation more than many others. You are a combat veteran. You saw 25 years of service. You've been in some pretty heavy combat zones. Compare what you saw in Gaza to your previous experiences in combat zones.
Yeah, so that goes to the former part of that question, and I'm glad we
Uh-oh. I think we lost Anthony momentarily. I don't know what happened. Maybe hit the wrong button. Yeah, he's back.
Am I back? Yeah.
Yeah, you're back.
So the so to the previous part of your earlier question, and now coming back on this, in my military career, I've been deployed 12 times. 9 of those 12 were in named combat war zone ongoing combat operations, directly a part of.
Yeah.
In my time, I'd seen places around the world such as Fallujah, Baghdad, Sadr City, Mosul, Anbar Province, Raqqa, Syria, Darwazar, Syria, Baghuz Fagani in Syria, all throughout Afghanistan. Never in my entire military career and all the places that I've been have I witnessed, experienced, or been akin to what I witnessed and experienced in Gaza. Without question, not even comparable. And the reason I say that is that, oftentimes prior to going to Gaza, I had seen pictures, I had seen reporting, but having been in a lot of war, I know that sometimes the images that are captured of things aren't necessarily the picture of all of it. Like, for example, in Raqqa. Raqqa was, for the most part, pretty heavily destroyed, but there was still life. There was still like functionality in the city.
Yeah.
In Gaza, nothing exists. The entire enclave has been annihilated physically, infrastructure, culturally, or there's no crops. The farmland has been destroyed and ruined. Every building has been crumbled and crushed to the ground. Nothing exists in Gaza, in the greater enclave. The only part where there's still any semblance of life, and even that is hanging on a thread, is in Gaza City, where, as we speak, the IDF are going in and conducting their final assault into Gaza City. That too will not remain in the coming weeks. And I've said this before in other interviews, and I'll say it again. A day of reckoning is coming. A day of reckoning is coming. That the world will get tired of the facade of everything's fine. Get tired of the narrative from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that there's no starvation and there's no shooting. The world will see. And when that day comes, which will be soon, I'm telling you, it will be in the coming weeks. And when that day comes, it will bring the world to its knees in shame for what we allowed to happen, for what we stood by and watched. And if we as a world don't do something about this now, we have no excuse when the truth comes out, when the world sees, to say, oh, we didn't know? We knew.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a live stream genocide. I think everyone watching this knows, and more people who I never expected to know. I think the public knows. It's simply our leadership and the Israeli leadership that is sort of existing in a delusional state. I really think that, Mike Huckabee, for example, or Benjamin Netanyahu, they believe their own lies about starvation. But you were on the ground and you say that you saw engineered starvation. Tell us what you saw.
So first of all, for my personal opinion, I'll say that I don't think Mike Huckabee and Witkoff believe that there's no starvation. I
Really?
think it keeps them up at night. I don't think they're evil people. I think that they're misled. I think that their loyalties lie to something greater than what it should lie. I think that their loyalties should lie to the people of the United States and to the conscience of humanity.
Yeah.
But I don't think they believe it. I don't think they believe it. The face on Mike Huckabee's, the look on his face when he was there and what he saw, he knows what he saw. He doesn't believe it. He says it, that there's no starvation, or that he doesn't believe it. Does Johnny Moore, the director of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, believe that the mechanism is working? He doesn't believe it. If he believed it, he wouldn't hide. You know how many times he's been to Gaza? Once.
Yeah. This is the kind of crony Christian Zionist pastor who's close to Mike Huckabee, and he's been a Trump endorser, who was put in place of Jake Wood at the head of GHF, Johnny Moore. And
yeah, I tell you, I don't think they believe what they say. In fact, I know that at night it probably weighs on their conscience if they have one, and I think they do. Mr. Witkoff, Mr. Huckabee, Mr. Moore, Mr. Chapin Fay, the spokesperson for GHF, who I'm telling you that if anyone believes a word that man says, you probably need to look yourself in the mirror. Just look at the history of the things that man has said, and realize that what we're putting at stake as a nation, what we're putting at stake as a world, is our humanity. This is not a time for politics. This is not a time for double speak and narratives. This is not a time for what side of the aisle you're on. This is a time for humanity to be human. People are dying and starving and being killed. There are children, Amir, 10 years old. There are children that are starving to death. And anybody that says that that's not happening, shame on you. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Shame on you.
We played some of the video that I think you shot while you filmed while you were at one of the so-called aid distribution hubs. I think it was around Rafah, and Khan Yunis might have been, or was it Khan Yunis? I can't remember which one, but you could hear in the background other U.S. security personnel, private contractors calling for the Israeli army, for the IDF to come in and to let some of them in. Mm-hmm. And so you were kind of, there was this communications line with the IDF and the Israeli army, but the Israeli army, as we've seen, has been killing people at these aid distribution hubs, firing tank shells, sniping at them. The featured image for this live stream was actually a photo taken by an Israeli soldier looking through his rifle scope at crowds of desperate aid seekers. What was was there any ability on your part to prevent the Israeli army from killing people? And what did you witness them do? And what is your perspective on the Israeli soldier after having dealt with them on such an intimate level?
Tactically on the ground at the sites, there was very little control or very little influence that I had at the tactical level. It would be, for example, if even in the American military, if I'm an infantry platoon leader and I'm in combat with my platoon, and someone else from another, let's say from a foreign army, comes in and tries to tell my platoon what to do, they're going to be like, we don't listen to you. So in terms of like influence or the ability to control at a tactical level, very limited.
Yeah.
But I'd like to share this with the audience. I've shared this before, and I will share it again in testimony. On the 8th of June, while I was in the control room, the control center in Karim Shalom, in the control center that's run by Safe Breach Solutions, the parent contract entity.
Yeah.
The UG solutions had have representation in there that rotate on a duty basis. That was my duty day. That was my day of pulling duty in the operations center.
Yeah.
In that operations center, there are Israeli Defense Force liaisons that work and are assigned to that operations center 24/7. That work in that operations center that tell Safe Breach Solutions what to do. While we were in there, every distribution site has cameras, and these cameras at the distribution sites feed back into a large screen TV in the operations center, one per site. So at all times, it's like if you were watching a football game with, where cameras can go all the way right up to the quarterback throwing the ball. That type of detail in this operations center.
Wow.
On the 8th of June at Secure Distribution Site number 2. Secure Distribution Site number 2, so Secure Distribution Site 3 was near Khan Yunis. Secure Distribution Site number 1 was all the way in southern Rafah. And 2 is kind of nestled right in between there, which, if you really wanted to give it an area, would be probably southern Mawasi. But really southern Khan Yunis in its overall location. And it's the smallest of all 4 sites. It physically is the smallest. And it is the poorest constructed in terms of the entrance and the exit being very narrow, not a lot of room, not a lot of space. It's very congested, but also it's surrounded on both sides by 2 different Israeli combat units. It's a dangerous site. On this particular day, the crowding on the site was very, was just swelling with crowding. People were being pushed into the barbed wire, pushed into the concrete. And this Palestinian man picked up these children, 3 children, and picked them up so they could step on his shoulders to step up on top of the barriers so they weren't being crushed.
Yeah.
All these 2 were under the age of 10. 1 was probably around 12 or 13. None of them were armed. They didn't have weapons, rifles, pistols, bombs, sticks. They had nothing. They had nothing. They didn't even have shoes. The older boy wasn't even wearing a shirt.
Wow.
And the Israeli Defense Force senior officer in the operations center back in Karim Shalom watching this came right up to me and he said, "Get on the radio and tell your men to get them down." Because I had part of that duty was communicating with the unit on the ground, the UG Solutions contractors on the ground. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, calm down. They have it under control. They know what they're doing. These are children. It's not a threat. Get them down. Get them down right now." And I said, "They're addressing it. They're addressing it. I'm not going to call them on the radio to tell them to do something that they're already doing when they're already dealing with so much. And they're talking to them. Look, they're talking to them to get them down. Get them down now." And I said, "They're taking care of it." He goes back to his desk where there was a radio, speaks on the radio. I don't speak Hebrew, so I didn't understand what he said. One of the UG Solutions contractors in our operations center did speak Hebrew, and he tells me, he said, "Hey, he just told the snipers, the IDF snipers to get ready to shoot them." And I was like, "Shoot who? The kids?" He was like, "Yeah." So this officer comes back up to me, and he says, "Get them down." And I looked at him and I said, Did you just give an order for your snipers to shoot these children?" And he said, "If you're not going to take care of it, I will." And I looked at him and I said, we are not, 1, we are not shooting children. 2, you are not shooting at unarmed civilians. 3, you're not going to shoot into the site where if you miss, you're going to hit other civilians or maybe even shoot an American. You're not doing that. During this discourse, thank heaven, the 3 children that were on the berm during that period had run to the end and jumped off. They didn't want to be there. They were being be there. So they didn't want to be there either. So thank God we didn't have to come to the realization of what would have happened. But in that moment, it became very clear to me that this Israeli officer had zero issue, zero qualm consciously or morally or ethically in shooting unarmed civilians, but more so in shooting unarmed children. And in that moment, it became very apparent to me that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is an appendage of the Israeli Defense Force, not an entity for humanitarian aid, because the Safe Reach Solutions operations director in that control room then called me over. He said, "Hey, Tony, come here." And I stepped outside and he said to me, "Never say no to the client." And I said, what do you mean? And he said, "Don't say no to the client." And I was like, what are you talking about? Who's the client? And he said, the IDF is our client. We work for them. Do not say no to the client. And I said, well, first of all, the IDF is our client. I was like, that's news to me. I thought we were an independent entity delivering humanitarian assistance for the people of Palestine or for the people of Gaza. What do you mean the IDF is our client? And he's like, our contract with Israel is through the IDF. We work for them. And I was like, whoa. I was like, that's interesting. Didn't know that. And then he further explains that we don't say no to the client. And I said, so if the client is willing to shoot unarmed people, we say yes to that. He's like, we're not the ones shooting them. If they want to shoot at them, that's up to them. But we don't say no to the client. And I was like, that's a problem. That's a real problem.
Sounds like the title of a horror film about this whole endeavor, The Client. There's a lot to unpack there. And I want to kind of pivot to the structure of GHF and also the broader agenda of the GHF on the ground. First, because you mentioned these cameras at Kerem Shalom and how much surveillance they're conducting on the local population. This was actually foreshadowed in planning documents, which the Washington Post reported on back in May. They wrote the planning documents anticipated public skepticism. I love the use of that term, and preemptively prepared talking points in case the GHF encountered allegations likening its food distribution hubs and residential compounds to, quote, concentration camps with biometrics, or comparing the organization to Blackwater, a former U.S. mercenary firm implicated in violence against civilians in Iraq. Now, what you see at these so-called distribution hubs are lots and lots of young men who represent the strongest member of each family who've been sent out to collect a box of food or flour so that their families can survive. But from the Israeli perspective, these represent they're all terrorists essentially, or they represent potential Hamas frontline fighters, Nukba commandos. So they would presumably want to lure this population to a heavily surveilled, heavily militarized area, and then target them, including with, as this planning document mentioned, biometrics to get their faces on camera, get them in the database. Is that something you saw happening? To what extent is GHF, Safe Reach Solutions, carrying out biometric surveillance on behalf of Israeli intelligence?
You know, sir, I have been searching for the way to describe that, and you just laid it out perfectly. You are absolutely correct. Fact. Every camera, or excuse me, every site, secure distribution sites 1, 2, 3, and 4, are all equipped with 6 high definition, full view, zoom, trackable cameras. Of those 6 cameras, 1 of the 6 is further equipped with a biometric capability to where it can scan the crowd and facial recognition software. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And I would ask everybody, look, this is not Tony Aguilar making this up. Anybody out there today, Google Safe Reach Solutions and go to their website where they're saying job opportunities in the Middle East. And 8 of those job opportunities are for an intelligence analyst. Why Why does a humanitarian assistance mission need an intelligence analyst? That's a military operation.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you why. Because in the Joint Operations Center, every one of those cameras at every one of those sites has a dedicated intelligence analyst that sits there 24/7 and does biometric data gathering on the population, on the crowd, on the group of people that are coming to the sites. And then what do they do with that information? They turn it around and they're building a biometric database of every single human being that fits their description of a military-aged male. Then from that, they build these mugshots. I've seen it with my own eyes. There's proof of it. It's in Safe Reach Solutions' own situation reports that they send to GHF every day. So, are they absolutely using these sites to lure the population to their locations? Yes. All the distribution sites are built far away from the population in need. So therefore, anybody and everybody that wants to get to the sites has to travel a great distance. To me, that is called luring. That is displacement. And then when they are there, the reason, and now because I asked myself this, why are the entrances and the exits so small? Like, why do we have thousands of people coming through this entrance that's this small? Well, I'll tell you why. The size, the length of the entrance perfectly fits the framing of the camera at distance from the pole that it sits on to frame the entrance perfectly for the biometric camera. That entrance wasn't built that size out of coincidence. It was built for purpose. And its purpose is not to allow the efficient flow of human beings onto a site to get food. The purpose was for collecting biometrics of the population as they came in. That's why they were built that way. It's shocking.
Yeah. And I think there's a longer term plan here that the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz announced back in June, around the same time that the GHF initiated its mission. And I've seen this in previous planning documents that we revealed at the Grayzone back in February or January, which were Boston Consulting helped produce.
Mhm.
And this is for essentially biometric concentration camps after the population is forcibly transferred out of the north. Gaza city's destroyed. This is the Guardian. Israeli plan for forced transfer of Gaza population, a blueprint for crimes against humanity. Israel's defense minister has laid out plans to force all Palestinians in Gaza into a camp on the ruins of Rafah in a scheme that legal experts and academics describe as a blueprint for crimes against humanity. He called for establishing a, quote, humanitarian city on the ruins of Rafah, reported Haaretz. And if you read the Haaretz report, there's a mention of a distribution hub inside that city of 500,000, which will be closed off through a kind of biometric wall, and no one will be allowed to leave unless they go through Egypt. So do you see this as part of a larger agenda to build these kinds of camps, and GHF in on this?
Not only do I see it theoretically, I saw it physically. Here's the truth. Yeah. Here are the facts. That is already underway. Out of the 4 secure distribution sites, 3 of them were in the south of the Marag corridor in what used to be Rafah, and 1 is up near the Netzarim corridor. The one that's up near the Netzarim corridor is being shut down in terms of its use, not going to use it anymore. And they're focusing all of the effort now into the 3 into the south. Site number 1, secure distribution site number 1, is so large, or as it was built originally, that you could put all 4 distribution sites onto it. And all of us asked from the beginning, like, why is site 1 so big? No one hesitated to tell us from Safe Reach Solutions. Site 1 is the foundation of phase 3. Phase 3, what's that? Well, phase 3 is when we design the humanitarian assistance transit area, where all of the Palestinians will be brought south to live. and this will be the main hub that supports them. So everything that you just said, oh, that's not a theory. That's in reality. And if you look at satellite imagery right now, or you get anybody to be an independent face to go in, secure distribution site number 1 right now is under construction. What is it being under construction for? Because they're expanding it and building it because phase 3 has been approved. UG Solutions and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation have been funded with the 30 million they got from the State Department and the 30 million they got matched to that from these international donors, this secret cabal of Western European countries that nobody will tell us who it is.
Yeah.
They are now funded through December. That is a fact. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is fully funded to continue to operate at full level until December. What is being built? That humanitarian assistance transit village, if you will, where everybody will be moved to the south and live in that area where this humanitarian assistance transit area will service that population. Not to maintain that population, but as a way of they get moved out from where they live, they spend some time there, and they get processed on out of Gaza. Where they go, I don't know. But that plan, that's not a blueprint. That is a plan. That is being done. That is happening time now.
So GHF is part of a plan for concentration camps, and phase 3 is essentially the final solution. And that would be my interpretation. Gaza City's destruction is pivotal to this plan because you have to eliminate sort of free range Palestinians so they can be confined and they can't be able to, sustain their own mode of existence in their homes. It all kind of comes together and makes sense. And you mentioned the funding of GHF, which has sort of been mysterious. Now, Israeli opposition leader Avigdor Lieberman, who's very right-wing, very anti-Palestinian, comes from a similar perspective as Netanyahu. He's just not in the government. He complained that the Israeli taxpayer was putting up too much money through the Mossad and the defense ministry for GHF, and that they'd established these shells in Switzerland. Another opposition leader, Yair Lapid, said the same thing. Now it looks like the Europeans are sharing some of the burden. I want to play a clip by Chapin Fay, who is the sort of gun for hire public relations director of GHF, longtime kind of political PR mercenary.
Yes, I can tell you they're in Western Europe, but again, they have asked us to keep this private, and we are honoring that commitment to them. We've received $30 million from the Trump administration in America. We also are funded by donor nations who have asked us for political and other reasons to not publicly state who they are. So I and we do not speak for them. So that's where our funding comes from.
Well, anonymous countries.
Yes, I can tell you they're in Western Europe, but again, they have asked us to keep this private, and we are honoring that commitment to them.
I mean, that's extraordinary and pretty unheard of in the aid world, isn't it? I mean, so you can't, for example, say whether Israel is funding this.
I can. We do not take money from Israel and would likely say no to money from Israel. I'm sure you have heard, as we have, some rumors from politicians and governments talking about more funding and expansion. We are waiting to hear from the Trump administration on what that might look like. We are ready and eager to expand and feed more people. But as of right now, we are funded through the end of the year.
You are coordinating very closely with the Israelis. You just admitted that. So why is this killing going on?
Yeah, I mean, I stated it. I'm not admitting anything. The way you're asking these questions, you have an agenda. But
no,
so
I have no agenda other than trying to find out what GHF is really about.
Well, as I said, we work with the IDF to deconflict outside our sites, and of course, they're waging a war. So the UN also works with the IDF and is also approved by the government of Israel to be able to operate inside Gaza.
So Chapin Fay refuses to say which European countries are funding him. I mean, they've been kicked out of Switzerland, as far as I know. Their license was eliminated there.
That's true.
Yeah. So do you know anything about the funding of GHF that the public doesn't know? And could Israel be using sort of shells in Western Europe? Like, what's going on here?
I have no evidence or proof of that, but what I do know is that even the United States Congress, both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat alike, even the United States Congress can't get those answers from GHF. We gave them $30 million. USAID. So people think that USAID doesn't exist anymore. As an agency in operation, that is true. However, USAID oversight still exists for contracts that were put in place while USAID still existed. So USAID as a governing entity over these existing contracts does still exist. And one of those contracts is what was put through the US State Department through USAID to give GHF $30 million. And I know for a fact that the USAID is investigating this and being like, where did that money go? Why have you not done any of the accountability measures that you have for this money that you got from the American tax dollar? So it is absolutely corrupt. And any American that watches that interview that you just showed, if you don't finish that interview absolutely disgusted with the blatant lies that you're being told, that to me sounded like it could have been something that came out of North Korea. That to me sounded like something that could have come out of communist China. If that doesn't make your skin crawl, I don't know what does. I'd rather have Bill Cosby make me a drink than listen to anything that Chapin Fay says with any type of trust. That dude is shady. So when you think about why all the secrecy, why all the doublespeak and the shell game, the Israeli GHF has even already said that this is an American-Israeli project. Israel is funding it. That's not a secret. That is a fact. To what degree they're funding it, I don't know. But they're funding it. And so here's the thing. This is why I think, the Gaza Humanitarian
Having some internet issues with Anthony Aguilar. I'm going to briefly just remove him, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve those. That is unfortunate. And Anthony, if you're watching this, maybe just leave the green room and click the link again that I gave you, and we can get started again. But this was a stunning interview. I mean, I didn't know that there was an actual workable plan to move to a phase 3 of concentration camps that actually involved the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I mean, this is a titanic crime that Johnny Moore and John Ackery are involved in. These are the directors. John Ackery's home in Northern Virginia and Vienna has been the site of sustained protests. So too has Johnny Moore's home in the DC area. This is, incredible activism that's taking place with an understanding that these figures are fronting for an Israeli genocide. And we're hoping to get Gaza Humanitarian Foundation whistleblower Anthony Aguilar back. I see he is coming back into the studio and just reconnecting his device. And I think we got him back. So
that is not someone attempting to jam me or sabotage. That is my own lack of ability to use technology. So that was my fault. Someone rang my Ring doorbell and the notification came up, so it dropped this call, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So
it's like
I am not. I am such like a 1980s child. But anyway, what I was saying was that the reason this concern in terms of the funding and everything else is that, to be clear, the Safe Reach Solutions, the contract entity of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation isn't a thing. There's no agency to it. It's Johnny Moore and a PR guy, Chapin Fay. There's nothing that exists to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's like a shell. It's like an offshore dial center. There's nothing to it.
Right.
So Safe Reach Solutions is a for-profit company. They exist to make money. They provide a service. They are for profit, 1,000%. The contract that they hold, basically the Israeli government said, we don't want the UN distributing humanitarian aid. We want a private entity that we can control to do it. Oh, Safe Reach Solutions, you're going to do it. We're going to pay you all this money to do it. And then about 3 weeks into mission, 3 weeks into the operation, SRS came back with, we're out of money.
Yeah.
Because they don't know anything about humanitarian assistance. They don't even know how to fake it. They don't even know what it would cost to fake humanitarian assistance. Oh, well, geez, you got to worry about trucks and gas and paying truck drivers, and things don't always go to plan, so you might have to pay overtime, and oh, you have to pay this many contractors for this much time. That they didn't plan for it properly. So within the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe, within the first 30 days, they burned through the budget. So they had to go back to the Israeli government. I know because I was present for these conversations. We're out of money. What do you mean you're out of money? You're a contract. We paid you. So the Israeli government is now kind of pissed at GHF too, because GHF is bamboozling both the United States and Israel. Hey, America, give us money. Hey, Israel, you paid us, but we burned through the money before we did what you told us to do. We need more money. That both, like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation isn't just ripping off the American taxpayer, they're ripping off the Israeli taxpayer.
And so the head of Safe Reach Solutions is someone has no role, has no history in aid. He's
so I'll tell you what, like the CEO, the owner, the mastermind behind this entire humanitarian aid project, you would think is someone that is well steeped and deeply educated and experienced in humanitarian assistance and humanitarian aid around the globe, and he's bringing this to the forefront. You would be 100% wrong. That individual spent his entire career as a special activities division officer and chief within the CIA. That's who we have leading the humanitarian aid effort. Who do we have leading the security effort? Who, Bytel, is leading security for the distribution of humanitarian aid and assistance in Gaza? Someone that has a deep knowledge of security? Someone that maybe spent a summer as a security guard at the mall? Maybe, I don't know, some type of experience in security? Nope. That person is the president of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. That's who we have in charge of security. I wish I was making this up. I'm not. The guy in charge of security to deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza is a chapter president of the Infidels Motorcycle Club, who in 2008 was separated from the army because he was alleged and accused and found to have committed fraud and conspiracy against the United States government in the execution of a military contract. That's the guy we have in charge of the entire security apparatus in Gaza. The guy that's in charge of Safe Reach Solutions his only experience in life is being a CIA covert operator. That is a recipe for success. No wonder Jake Wood stepped down.
Yeah. So the person who is in charge of security and was convicted for fraud, what is his name?
His name is Johnny Mulford. He goes by Taz. That's his cool guy name, Taz. When he got out of the army, he went off and living the American dream. He started himself a fishing boat business out in Florida. So the person that the United States has at the forefront of leading the security operation with $30 million of your tax dollars, America, who oh, by the way, while on these sites is overseeing the absolute irresponsible escalation of force against civilians, is a fishing boat captain who runs a motorcycle club. That's great.
I know your time is tight and you committed to an hour. Do you have just a few more minutes?
I do. Yeah, I've got a few more minutes. This is great. I think you've given me new perspective just on, like I said, on the way you described. I've been searching for those words and by God, it is that. And it should not only be concerning to Americans, it should scare Americans that the United States is being puppet mastered by a foreign government and just crept into being complicit in war crimes. That should scare an American.
You think Israel is just dictating this entire policy?
Think? I know.
Wow. Well, I think I know it too. I wanted to ask you just another kind of granular question since you were talking about personnel. Have you ever interacted with someone named Mark C. Schwartz, who is a intelligence figure at the Special Operations Command Europe, who was just listed as a GHF advisor?
Mark C. Schwartz is a retired U.S. Army Green Beret general officer, served in Special Forces. I know him. I wouldn't say I know him very well, but anyone that served in the Special Forces regiment during my time throughout my career knows Mark Schwartz.
Yeah.
Green Beret, Special Forces Green Beret. Not sure when he retired, but it wasn't that long ago. But when I saw that he is now on the advisory board for GHF, it absolutely shocked me. And I hope that they're paying Mark enough money to turn his back on the oath that he took as an officer. I hope the money's worth it, Mark.
Why did it shock you that Mark C. Schwartz was involved?
Because of everything, he's an Army officer. He's a Green Beret. He's sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of this nation. And the fact that he's in bed with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, to me, is despicable.
Yeah.
And I mean, that website you showed him there, it appeared, I didn't know this, but appears he's also part of the Thayer Consulting Group, which is out of West Point, my alum, where I graduated. I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy.
Yeah.
The things they taught me at the United States Military Academy, the harder right over the easier wrong, that you choose, your oath to the Constitution reigns supreme over your oath to anything else, especially money. So it's despicable to me that the United States is involved in something that is being dictated entirely by another country. But in doing so, wake up, America. Have you not seen every other nation in the world, France, Germany, Spain, Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, all of our G7 partners, NATO partners are looking at this and saying, this is wrong. There are war crimes being committed. There are crimes against humanity being committed. And it does Israel good in their objective to have us right along with them as the bedfellow. Because when the world comes for accountability, which I'm telling you, man, it's not years from now. It's not months from now. It's days from now. When this box is opened and the world demands accountability, and Israel is going to say, you know what? Oh, we had Uncle Sam right here with us. You're going to get mad at them? I'm telling you, there's a day of awakening coming. And if we are not on the right side of history now, we won't be.
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought up Mark Schwartz was because it's just kind of telling that they're bringing so many military figures on as advisors, especially someone who's advising former military officials on IT solutions and has been involved in kind of Gene Sharp methods for kind of societal control. And they're also bringing all of these pro-Israel influencers down to propagandize for them. It's kind of like they're just showing their hand. They're not really even pretending to be a neutral aid organization anymore. And I think you really ripped the mask off, and now they are targeting you. So
Of course.
So I wanted to give you a chance to respond to some of the personal attacks that have been directed against you by sort of an anonymous Green Beret account. Someone named Matt Tardio has been attacking you. And one of your defenders, who's a friend of the Grayzone, Mel Whitty, has documented that in their attempt to paint you as a abuser, they took two completely court documents, one a separation agreement. They're going after your personal life, and the other a separate court order from 8 months later, and welded them together as though they were one. Then they presented two completely different documents as proof that you were charged with spousal abuse. That, according to Mel Whitty, this is a lie, a bold-faced effing lie. She also documented that one of the documents, or she also showed that one of the documents that they sought to weaponize against you was fabricated. So I wanted to get your response to these allegations and why you think it's happening. What do you think they're going to do next to try to shut you up?
You know, I'm so thankful to Mel. She's a warrior. Thank you, Mel. And what I'll say about and again, we don't know each other. Like, I don't, you know, like Mel and I aren't paid by some secret conglomerate. I never met her. Her name has come to my attention because of her defense of me online. But what I will say is that here's the thing.
Yeah.
To anybody out there, Matt Tardio, who, you know, if we want to dig up dirt, you know, he held a podcast where he was crying online because his ex-wife beat him up because he admitted to killing children in Iraq in Afghanistan. So yeah, that's a great source of information. So Matt Tardio, who I don't even know, never even met the guy. Talked to him once on the phone because I called him because I said, hey, you got a lot to say. Say it to my face. To the other person out there, Green Beret Nap Time, who's been so anonymous. Well, his name is Chase Hill. He's he's the chief executive officer or the chief operations officer of the Special Forces Charitable Trust, an organization that I have been a part of that claims to help veterans. This man is their COO, who, if you go back through the history of his posts, vile comments, comments towards women. I don't know how many times he's called Mel just some pretty abhorrent names. But here's the truth to anyone out there that wants to question my life. Here's the truth. I grew up in a military family. My mother served in the Air Force. My father served in the Navy. I served 25 years for this country in uniform. Purple Heart, Bronze Star Medal for Valor, an ARCOM Medal for Valor. They don't just give those away. Those are combat awards. 25 years of service, grateful service, honorable service. I retired with an honorable discharge. 100% totally and permanently disabled because of my combat wounds and injuries. I served my country. My wife, career Army officer, retired. Also 100% totally and permanently disabled. Veteran of combat, 82nd Airborne. My wife. My wife and I are still married to this day. This December, we will celebrate 17 years of marriage. We have never been married to anyone else. We are each other's first love and first marriage, and we are still married today. So if anybody wants to dig up the past of my marriage or put that into social media, I don't care. Because my wife and I, we have a wonderful home. We have a wonderful family. We have a wonderful child. The things that my wife and I have endured as a family, no one would understand. Ask yourself, both military officers, both of us, between the two of us, we have 45 years of service. Between just the two of us. Between just the two of us, we have spent over 7 years in war. Between just the two of us. So if anybody out there wants to question that, go for it. Because that just makes you look despicable. My wonderful wife, who I am married to this day, who's right downstairs right now having lunch, is the love of my life, my soulmate. What shade are you bringing by bringing up like obviously fake documents, things pulled together? Fine. Have at it. Don't care. It's not going to shut me up. And I've said this before, and I will say it again. There are a lot of people behind me that are coming. to GHF, to Safe Reach Solutions, to UG Solutions, the truth is on the way. And that's not just from me. You are in for a rude awakening for the amount of people that are about to go on the record and tell the truth, to include members of the IDF, to include former contractors, to include former truck drivers, to include former staff. They're all coming. You've put all your hate and all your shade on me. Bring it. Put it on me. I can take it. I'm a big boy. Because I'll tell you what, like I said, like I told you in the beginning of the show, just this morning I got a phone call from the Special Forces Association parachute team telling me that I couldn't be on their team anymore because of me talking against Israel. Okay. Oh, well, I can't be a part of your little club, so I better reconsider my life decisions as to whether or not I support war crimes. Give me a break. I don't care. I don't. So put it on me. Bring it on. Put it on me. I don't care. Put everything on me. Because at the end of the day, I've got a wonderful wife. I've got a wonderful family, my parents, my in-laws, my child, my church community, our scouting community, the people that I know that love me. All these people that want to discredit me, I've never even met them. Never even met them. I don't care. But what I do care about is the truth, and that the American people know the truth. I've got no agenda. The truth. So notice what I would like everyone to notice, please. Not one time has the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, UGS, or Safe Reach Solutions ever taken a serious approach to the questions and the allegations that I brought forth. War crimes. You think you're going to get out of war crimes by saying that I'm a bad husband? Okay. That's like you're about to walk into The Hague and your only concern is what the urinal mints taste like in the bathroom. Who cares? Who cares? You're about to be on trial from the world for war crimes, and your only recourse is that I'm a bad husband? Okay, well, that's disproven in about that quick, because my wife of 17 years is here, like, okay, got it. I'm okay with it. In fact, all those insults and all that shade and all that hate, I wear it like a badge of honor. Thank you. Keep doing it.
Why are you the only whistleblower from what appears to be a completely criminal operation that has taken U.S. military veterans into a fight on behalf of a foreign military that has some extremely disgraceful, it's an extremely disgraceful record? Why are you the only one? And what would your message be to guys in the field right now working with UG Solutions?
So first of all, I'm not the only one. And what a lot of the guys right now under UG Solutions that are there right now working, what they are naive and oblivious to is the fact that I am not the only one. I'm not.
So someone else has spoken out who was.
Well, just look at it. Look at before I came on the record. You had a there was a piece, an op-ed that came out in Zello. I don't know the name of the platform. Starts with a Z. Zelos or
Zeteo?
Anyway, Zeteo. Thank you.
Okay.
So back in June, there was an op-ed that came out in Zeteo. That wasn't me.
Okay.
You had a that was a UG Solutions contractor.
It was anonymous, right?
Anonymous.
Yeah.
But he's moving forward. That wasn't me. That wasn't me. You had the second in command of the entire contract who resigned in protest and sent on the record through official email to the CEO of UG Solutions all of his concerns about what the problems were. That wasn't me that did that. You've got a truck driver who went on the record with who went anonymous with Israeli TV, who talked about the tank that shot the car at site number 4, which I also saw. I don't know that guy. That wasn't me. That's 3. In the Associated Press article and in the BBC article, of which I was a contributor, there were 2 other contractors in there that were anonymous. They weren't me. So that's 6 already. Not to mention the IDF that are coming forward with videos that corroborate everything that I've said. Not to mention the doctors and the surgeons from Médecins Sans Frontières and from other entities that have video and pictures and testimony. And when you put all that together, it starts to paint a picture. And that picture is called the truth. And you can't run from it. So what I would convey to all of the contractors that are there that have seen what I've seen, it's on video. You have seen it. You have seen it. If you think that UG Solutions or Safe Breach Solutions is going to have your back when the world comes calling, you are sorely mistaken. They will throw you under the bus just as quick as that paycheck clears. So I'm telling you, search your soul. You've seen what I've seen. And man, that money is good. That $1,380, I think they gave them all a raise. That $1,400 a day, $1,400 a day, that is good money. But when that money ends and you have to face your wife and face your children, and your children one day ask, when in a short period of time here, in our lifetime, this will be a situation where the world will say, we all should have known. The world will say, this, we all would have said no had we known, but you know. And when that day comes and your children and your legacy and your offspring and your wife look at you and say, weren't you there? Weren't you there? Well, you think UG Solutions and Safe Breach Solutions is going to be there to cover for your guilt? No. So I'll tell everybody right now that they've seen what I've seen and they know what I know. Now's the time to come forward.
We had a question from a viewer. Did you or other UG Solutions employees have to sign an NDA before joining?
No.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Complete incompetence.
Well, they'll probably change that. And I think they're trying to make an example of you to prevent others from coming forward.
Of course they are. And that's what I think, again, they in the presser, I guess. It's not really a press conference when you don't take questions, but I guess a few weeks ago when GHF came out with their press conference with Chris Farley, aka Chapin Fay. I don't know if you've seen, he looks just like Chris Farley, but when
not as merry or joyful.
Yeah.
Like
like Chris Farley's evil twin brother. But when he came out and did this press conference, and then they had the attorney from UG Solutions talk. That attorney had already deposed me about 2 weeks before that about the war crimes that I saw. So he just lost all of his client privilege by coming forward on a press conference and divulging all of that. What an idiot. I don't know who they hired, like Bert and Ernie. Like, I don't get it. Like, what an idiot. I'm not even a lawyer. And I looked at that. I'm like, well, that was dumb. Why would you do that? You've already deposed me. Now you can't. Now you just made that all hearsay. Congratulations, idiot. So I don't know what their game is other than to discredit me and smear me. But they said things like, Mr. Aguilar wasn't on the site. Here's a picture of a site of this little boy. I took that picture. The picture that they used to discredit me being at a site is a picture that I took at that site on that day.
This is a picture of the boy Amir, who you say was later killed by Israel.
Yeah. So in that, during that little smear fest they had of me, they took a picture of Amir that I took on the 28th of May at site number 3. I took that picture. They put up another picture of a boy. They said, well, here's Amir 2 days later at that site. Well, you know what? That picture is not Amir, and it's not at the same site. The picture that they put up there of the little boy with his head being pat on the head, that's Amir. The picture they put up next to it was of a boy who was taken at site number 4, 25 kilometers difference of separation. You can't be at 4 and any of the others. You physically cannot. And that was taken on the 1st of June. How do I know that? Because I took that picture. They are idiots. So, like I said, they they expended their ammunition of smearing at me. But here I am, fire away. Because the people that are coming behind me, what I will tell you is that you're in the clear now. What are they going to do? Are they going to come out with the same rhetoric against you? And they're going to say that, oh, you were a bad employee too? They've put it all on me. The way is clear. Come forward. I know that they will. It's already happening. So I'm confident. I know it's already coming. I'm not the only one. I'm just the one that was willing to put my name on the line because it's that important to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if we actually had a Congress that wasn't controlled by Israel, you would have been called to testify. This is one of the greatest scandals of our time, and it's just it's a shame we're not hearing from you. Although Senator Van Hollen did interview you, and I think that was important.
So Senator Van Hollen, Senator Sanders, during my trip to the Hill, I also had an audience with Senator Tillis and Senator Warnock and Senator, another Republican, can't remember his name off the top of my head, but quite a few. And I'm going back up in September. And the voices of the constituents will get to a point to where everybody will have to recognize this. This is not something that you can ignore. This is not something you can just pretend you don't know. To every member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, regardless of what side of the aisle or what house you're in, you can't ignore this. So, and if you think you're going to ignore it, your constituents are going to demand accountability. Trust me.
How did Tillis and what was it, Senator Wicker who met with you?
It was not Wicker, Langford.
Yeah, Langford from Oklahoma. He's one of the Republicans who isn't completely in line with Trump and is getting attacked by Trump a lot. But how did the Republicans receive you? I mean, were they receptive or shocked by what you told them?
Very receptive. They gave us a good audience, and we had a good conversation. I think that what I think that GHF thrives, the environment that they thrive in, is people not understanding the truth on the ground, right? Well, I am that truth on the ground. GHF's plan on here's the part that's a real stick in the side for old GHF. Who put together the operational plan for the entire plan? The entire operational plan for the distribution of aid and how we would do convoys and how we would distribute the aid. I did. On the 21st of May, put it together and briefed it to the entire staff. Who's been to every site and took part in every distribution, before and after distribution? Who took pictures and videos of every site and every distribution from the 24th of May until the 13th of June? I did. So I don't know what to tell you, but when it comes to who knows more about Gaza and who knows more what went on at the sites and how the sites were planned and how the sites were executed and what wasn't and what was and what's a war crime and what not, it's not Johnny Moore. It's not Chapin Fay. It's not John Ackrey. It's not Phil Riley. It's me. And I'm telling the truth. And the truth is coming.
What kind of psychological toll did your experience in Gaza take on you, and how does it continue to affect you? And you're being turned into a pariah by, as you said, by veterans organizations for speaking out against a foreign military engaged in genocide, according to every human rights group. So, what are your future plans? How are you getting by?
Oh, I'm going to live and enjoy my life as I always had planned. My happiness is not in any way, my self-worth and my happiness is not in any way connected to any of those organizations or even my military service. I'm very proud of my military service. I served longer, harder, and endured more than most people ever will. And nothing's going to take that away from me. Not anybody's opinion, not any club or veterans organization. I'm a 100% permanently disabled veteran. I will get my VA for the rest of my life. I will get my retirement for the rest of my life. My wife is a retired Army officer who gets retirement for the rest of her life. My wife gets 100% VA for the rest of her life. Between the two of us, we bring in more income than we did while we were working in retirement. My son has enough GI Bill and Purple Heart yellow ribbon coverage to send him to school 9 times and back. We're fine, and we're doing great. And I get to spend my days. I mean, just this morning, my wife and I, it was a beautiful morning out. So we decided, well, we were getting ready. Let's go walk the dog. And then we both drove my son to school as a family. So I'll tell you what, I'm enjoying life. But more importantly, all is well in my soul, because I may not have the power and I might have the authority to change what I saw, but by God, when I meet my maker, no one's going to tell me that I didn't tell the truth.
Yeah, that's what's important, I think, for everyone who had to go against institutional or religious or cultural pressure. I think it's similar to a choice a lot of anti-Zionist Jews had to make, going against their families or their communities because they saw what the leadership was doing. So many people have to make this choice now. The moral test is right before us. I wanted to make, since you brought that up, I wanted to make one thing clear, so it's clear on the record. I am not anti-Israel. I am not an anti-Semite. I am not pro this or pro that or anti this or pro Hamas, or I'm definitely anti-Hamas. Like, yeah, put all that aside. What I am is pro humanity. I don't care how justified you are in the waging of a war. The indiscriminate killing of unarmed civilians. Unarmed civilians are the thing that all nations are obligated to protect at all costs in war. That's the cost of going to war. And yeah, war is costly and war is hell. But you don't just get to throw the rules out the window because you feel that you're justified. No. And if the United States is going to go along with that, then I think the American people need to know, because I don't think the American people would put up with it. In fact, I know they won't. Well, it's rare that I have a chance to interview or even meet a U.S. veteran who served for as long as you have in so many combat zones, who also actually got to see the reality or a version of the reality inside the Gaza Strip. And you mentioned that you're anti-Hamas, but you saw how oppressed people are and how much they're suffering in Gaza at the hands of an occupying Israeli military that are serving a system that does not have a place for them and essentially requires their expulsion in order to consolidate its rule as a so-called Jewish state. So as a soldier and as someone who saw what took place in Gaza, I just wanted to put a philosophical question before you. Do you understand why people in the Gaza Strip, why Palestinians take up arms, and why they have historically took up arms, and do they have a right to do so?
It's a great question. Even as a young lieutenant, I was second lieutenant and I was in Iraq. And that was the time where we had we had transitioned from high intensity war, the invasion, into where the United States ourselves had become an occupational army. To say that we weren't, I'd be like, okay, we've been there for 20 years now. I'm pretty sure we're an occupational army. So, and then in the very beginning of that occupation is when the insurgency began. Al-Qaeda in Iraq grew out of the remnants of what remained of, from Al-Qaeda, but then AQIZ. And I asked myself, how would I react if I was sitting at home in my neighborhood, nothing to do with the regime, nothing to do with the Ba'ath Party, and a foreign nation came in and blew everything to shit? And then here I am just trying to enjoy my life, and tanks roll down my street and destroy my roads and drive through my backyard. And I mean, hell, in the America, I get a summons from the homeowners association if I leave my Christmas decorations up too long. How would I respond if you know, my entire family and neighborhood were killed? How would I respond? I think I'd be pretty pissed off.
Yeah.
You know, I read a long time ago, can't remember. I'm having a brain fart here. I'm sorry. There was a people that left where they were from so they'd had religious freedom. And they got really pissed off about how that government had been treating them, that they decided to take up arms and draft a document of their own to be free. Can't remember who that was.
Yeah, it's not coming to me either.
Can't remember.
Minutemen.
But I'll tell you what. For the United States to ever look at anybody that is oppressed and to think that you shouldn't be pissed about being treated like shit, who are we? Because I'll tell you, we sure as hell felt that we were entitled to it. And by God, I'm a supporter of it. In fact, I swore my life to defend that Constitution and that Declaration. So I can't say how other people respond and what they do. And by no means would I ever think that violence begets violence and that that's a solution. No means do I ever think that. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of human beings in Gaza whose lives have been destroyed and ripped from under them that had nothing to do with Hamas and nothing to do with October 7th and nothing to do with the atrocities against the people of Israel. In fact, there was in some degree, in some level, between Israelis and Palestinians and those in Gaza, there was a level of cooperation. Was that shattered on October 7th? I believe it was. However, to think that every Palestinian is Hamas, shame on you for saying that. That is dangerous. To think that everybody in Gaza should be killed and or removed, that's genocidal talk. That is dangerous language. And for anybody that says it or supports it, you need to look at yourself in the mirror.
The most decorated Israeli soldier in history, who was former prime minister and defense minister, involved in many assassinations and war crimes against Palestinians, Ehud Barak, was asked, "What would you do if you were a Palestinian?" by a reporter. And he said, "I would pick up arms, pick up a gun and fight." So even they understand that perspective. But I really appreciate your unique perspective, which is constantly evolving, as is everyone's. You're speaking for so many people around the world. You're speaking for the global majority, and you're speaking for Americans, most importantly. And it's about time someone stood up like this from the ranks of the military and spoke like this, who saw the situation on the ground. And that's why I think you're getting such an enthusiastic response from our audience. This is one of the best interviews that I've had the opportunity to conduct here at the Grayzone since we launched. So I really appreciate you being so generous with your time, Anthony Aguilar, and for choosing the harder right over the easier wrong.
I thank you for this opportunity. I think you have a great platform, and I appreciate your depth of knowledge and what you brought to the conversation. I mean, I learned some things as well, and the way you describe some certain things helped me in understanding how to put to words some of the things that I felt that I've been trying to say. And again, what I want to remind everybody of is that I'm an American, and the United States of America, as a nation, as a people, we don't get pulled by the ear and dragged into something that we don't want to be a part of just for the sake of, because we don't know or being lied to. So wake up, America, because I'm telling you, what's next? What are we going to get dragged into next? Because when we get dragged into having boots on the ground to fight Israel's wars for them, and we have Americans coming home in body bags with flags draped on coffins, do not Do not hide your head in shame and put a yellow ribbon on your door and say we didn't know, because you do. And that is my warning to America.
Well, thank you again for that, Anthony Aguilar, GHF whistleblower, 25-year combat veteran and former Green Beret. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from you in the coming weeks and years until and after this genocide is over. And
I'll say the Special Forces Association and the Special Forces clubs, they've kicked me out because, you know, speaking against Israel is bad. And I want to say I'm not speaking out against Israel. What I'm speaking up for is human rights and dignity. So got a lot of time on my hands now, since I can't be a part of their little clubs because I don't toe the party line, which is ironic, because in Special Forces we don't toe the party line. But unless you don't toe the party line that doesn't toe the party line, you're not part of the party, which is fine. So I got plenty of time now, you know.
Well, Groucho Marx said I wouldn't be part of any club that would have me. So
that's right.
So
that's right.
Well,
I wouldn't be a part of the show.
You're kicked out of the club, but welcome to humanity.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Thanks again, Anthony.
Anytime. Let's stay in touch. I appreciate it, and thank you for all you do.
Peace. So that was an awesome interview. And as many commenters pointed out, kind of a Smedley Butler-like moment. I really resonated. The comparison of Smedley Butler really resonated with me there. We'll be processing that interview and getting it out on our various platforms. And thanks also to Glenn Diesen, one of the best analysts on Ukraine, Russia today. Thank you for supporting us at the Grayzone. I mean, this is what we do, and we can only do it thanks to you. This stream was suppressed. Apparently, it was censored in the EU on YouTube. So that really should emphasize the importance of liking it, of subscribing, and checking us out on other platforms like Rumble. I'll keep expanding to as many platforms as we can if they keep doing this to us. And, thanks for supporting in any way you can. We will be back hopefully later this week. I'm going to do kind of a news wrap up, a lot to talk about with Aaron Mate. And thanks for being here. This was enormous. Peace.